Hello and welcome to I Know Dino. I'm Garrett.
And I'm Sabrina.
And today in our 342nd episode, we have a bunch of news, including the long-awaited description of Cooper, the massive titanosaur from Australia.
Oh yeah, we've been waiting for years.
It's been breaking the internet as much as any dinosaur does, I guess. It's all over the place.
That's also a very large dinosaur.
Oh yeah, so it could definitely break a laptop or something if it stood on it, that's for sure. So yeah, we're going to talk a lot about that and other news. We also have an interview with Dean Lomax where we talk about all sorts of different fossils, including some really funny topical stuff like fossilized flatulence.
It's got a nice alliteration to it.
It's really hard to say. That took me a couple tries. And we have dinosaur of the day, Sauroniops, or Sauroniops, depending on where you put the emphasis.
Before we get into all that, though, it's June 16th, or at least it will be when this episode drops. And that means we're ready to announce our winner for our T-shirt design competition. So first, just want to say, again, thank you so much to everybody who participated in designing and in voting for the designs. It was a really great experience, and it was so cool to see all of the designs.
Oh, yeah. We were amazed at how many entrants we got. We were hoping to get like 3 or 4, and that's sort of where we were in the beginning, and then we got this huge flood of them.
I know. So much talent. I mean, we knew you were all talented, but to be able to see it.
Yeah. And it was very flattering how many people put like I Know Dino on it or like tried to include elements of our show and stuff. It was very cool.
Yeah. We got 640 votes for it, which was amazing as well to see. And I mean, we loved all of the designs, but we did promise there would be a winner.
But we did stretch out the winners because if any keen-eyed observers noticed, there was an asterisk saying we might expand the number of winners if we like lots of them. And since we had people vote for their 5 favorite, we ended up deciding, okay, well, let's just do 5 winners. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there are now 5 designs in our store from the entrants.
Yes, but the grand prize winner is the Sauropod T-shirt, which was designed by Venezoic. And it's really cool. It's a sauropod standing on top of the world. Sort of
Giraffatitan Brachiosaurus upright, and then its neck is like the antenna, and then there are like radio signals coming out of its head.
Yep.
It's really cool.
Well, it's definitely a Brachiosaurus, as on the description.
Oh, okay, good.
Really close in second place is the I Know Dino T-shirt by Spectrum Dragon, and that's the one of the T-Rex and this red-tailed hawk skeleton.
Yeah, it looks like the T-Rex is playing with the red-tailed hawk. I actually thought it was a chicken at first because that shows how much I know about what bird skeletons look like. But it looks like it's playing with it like a cat on its back, like curled up and like tossing at it. I don't know if that's the intention. That's just what it looks like to me.
I should mention all of these designs were really close in terms of the number of votes that they got. So the other designs that are going to be featured in our store are the Cute Dinosaur T-shirt by Cassie Mo Designs. And that one reminds me a lot of Gertie.
Oh, yeah. It's like a cute sauropod, sort of sketch style.
With hearts.
Although Gertie was a little more aggressive than this one looked like it would be.
Yeah. It just reminded me.
Yeah.
Then there's 80s Dino Rock T-shirt by King Mantis, which I really love the colors.
Yeah, it's very much like an 80s rock T-shirt because it's like all black and then it's got like the bright yellow and red.
And purple.
Yeah, logo in the middle. It's really enjoyable. With a couple dinosaur skulls on it.
And then there's the I Know Dino podcast T-shirt by That Nerdy Girl, which this one looked like some good personal touches. We've got the sauropod and the ankylosaur in front of I Know Dino, and those are our 2 favorites.
Yeah, they're really well drawn too. I like that one.
So thank you so much to everyone who participated. This was so cool to see. And we loved all the designs, so we actually ended up ordering items from each of them already.
Yeah.
And we'll be either wearing them or displaying them around the house.
Not just each of the 5 winners. We bought each of every single entrant because we just wanted to support everybody, and they're all so cool.
Yeah.
And if you want to see the winning designs or order them, emphasis on the order them because it's good to support the designers. And we also get a little benefit too if you buy it from our store. And you can get that by going to bit.ly/iknowdinostore. Again, bit.ly/IKnowDinoStore. You can show off your I Know Dino pride and support our listeners who created these really cool designs. And speaking of people supporting I Know Dino, we have a new patron this week, and that's Arya and Tristanosaurus. So thank you very much for joining. Good dinosaur-y name.
Mm-hmm.
And rounding out our shout-outs, we've got Rhinosaurus, Lucas and Eli, Richard, Kaylin, Taya, Stego Sophie, Brendan Kavanaugh, Pippaceratops, and Ben at Jurassic Site B.
Yes, thank you so much. We really love our dinosaur community, and we're so glad that you're a part of it. And if you want to join and get in on conversations with people about all kinds of dinosaur things in our Discord, as well as some other benefits, then go to our page at patreon.com/iknowdino.
So now, jumping into the news, we're going to kick it off with our new giant sauropod from Australia. This one was written by Scott Hucknall, which we've known about, that he was working on it for a while.
Mm-hmm. We met him at SVP in 2019.
Yep. And we were like, when are we going to hear about Cooper? And he said he's working
soon.
on it.
Yeah.
Which it's been soon in paleontological terms, at least. And there's also a slew of co-authors, as usual. And this was published in Pure J, which means it's open access. And that also means that you can read all 115 pages, not including references of this very long paper. It's super thorough. More than anything, it was almost like a complete compendium of recent paleontology in Australia, and some really good graphics of like Australia as a whole country and the different geological formations in it, and like how deep soil is, and all sorts of really in-depth geological details.
Did you already say it was 115 pages?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very long. I mean, the whole paper is 130, but 15 are references, and you don't really read that part. So 115 of reading material, 8.5 by 11 size, not like book 115
Single
pages.
spaced? Or?
Yeah, single spaced. There are some pictures, but there are also some very difficult words. So, although it was very well written, there weren't a lot of like made up words, because sometimes people write a paper and they just come up with a bunch of new words. This was easy to read as far as a 115 page paper goes. So I really appreciated that. And the massive size of the paper, I think, is pretty reasonable, considering that there was also a massive dinosaur. It is now the largest dinosaur ever found in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Although
it's a big
I
one.
wonder if they'll find bigger ones after this, because they're already finding more fossils and specimens.
They certainly could. We spoke with Joe Pegler and Corey Richards almost 2 years ago about this dinosaur back in episode 263, and they also both got shout-outs in the acknowledgments section of this paper.
Nice.
But yeah, Corey, he was the one that gave us our tour of the Eromanga Natural History Museum, and he showed us some of the bones, and some of them were like maybe bigger than Cooper. So yeah, it's possible that Cooper won't be the largest dinosaur in Australia for long. And really, Cooper's getting towards the upper limit of sauropods in general. So it's possible that Australia could have the largest dinosaur, period, if they get much bigger than Cooper. But we'll have to wait and see what comes out. So yeah, we're very happy that now Cooper, its nickname, has been for the last several years. Its full official name is Australotitan cooperensis. So they managed to keep Cooper in there. I really appreciate that.
That's good.
Yeah. And then Australotitan is Australian Titan, just like Patagotitan is Patagonia Titan, all that kind of stuff. And then they said they named it cooperensis because it's, quote, from the Cooper Eromanga Basin, Cooper Creek System, and Cooper Country.
That's a lot of Cooper.
It is a lot of Cooper. So yeah, well named, I think. And it is also the first dinosaur named from the Eromanga Basin.
Far from the last.
Yeah, we're expecting many more for sure. I guess they could have named it Eromanga Titan if they wanted to get like some extra attention.
Maybe the next one.
Yeah. That does seem to be the way it goes. You start with like a broader category when you find something in a place, and then it gets more and more specific. Like in China, a lot of the early dinosaurs were like Sino something for like Chinese, and then they went down to provinces, and now it's like a small town because that province already has the dinosaur named after it. I should point out, though, Cooper was found almost 100 kilometers west of Eromanga, which might be why it wasn't Eromanga Titan, because it wasn't really in Eromanga.
Right. It was more in Cooper.
Yeah. And there's also already a Wintonatitan, and that it was found in the Winton Formation, so that was already occupied. So they actually went bigger in this way than the previous find. In the map, too, where it shows that Cooper was 100 kilometers west of Eromanga, they also have another map that shows Australia, and it looks just like Mars. And to me, it looks like Mars because it's all like red color-coded, and the red gets darker the deeper the regolith is. And I've only heard regolith used in relation to Mars because Mars is covered in regolith.
It's the red planet.
Yes. But regolith actually just means broken up rock. So there's lots of regolith on Earth and other planets too. It's not just a Mars or the moon thing. It's anywhere that has regolith on it. And regolith translates as a, quote, rock blanket, if you go directly from Latin to English, since it covers the bedrock like a blanket. So that's why it's called regolith. Just a little side fun fact. But interestingly, in the Winton Formation, the expansion and contraction of the ground, quote, offers a likely mechanism that evidently brings hard material from within the underlying Winton Formation up to the soil surface, end quote.
Hard material like fossils?
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, Corey explained this to us when we did our tour there too, which is basically like the freeze-thaw cycle that like tears apart roads in colder places. It also brings bones up to the surface. But I thought it was funny that they had like a double caveat there, that it was like a likely mechanism, which evidently does this because it's such a weird mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't talk about fossils other places just like popping up out of the dirt.
No, usually they're really stuck in there.
Yeah, and you just see a little bit exposed, then you have to like dig down and get them out. But in Eromanga, they literally like pop up out of the ground. In some cases, though, they pop up out of the ground and then they excavate because like one popped out, and then you can dig down and find the other ones. So that's what they ended up doing with Cooper. They didn't all pop up out of the ground. They actually did do some digging
Just
there.
enough to let you know something interesting was there.
Yeah, exactly. I love that, though. Like, imagine if that happened everywhere. Like, one bone just popped up and it was like, there's bones here, just so you know.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. And it also kind of explains how like all these farmers and ranchers end up discovering the bones. And like with Cooper, it was discovered by someone on their own land. And then they were like, well, we should do something about this, and ended up basically starting the Eromanga Natural History Museum because they were like, there are dinosaur bones popping up out of our land. So cool. I love that story so much. So in the end, they did find quite a few of Cooper's bones. The specimen number is EMF 102, in case you're wondering. After the Eromanga Museum, that's what the EM is for. They found a complete right humerus, which is really helpful for size estimates because we have those for some of the other Australian titanosaurs. They got a right ulna, right and left pubes, right and left ischia, a partial left scapula, a partial left humerus, and both partial femora.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
They also referred a few bones from other localities to Australotitan.
Oh, yeah? What'd they refer?
They got a complete femur from one spot, a partial humerus from another spot, and then a third spot that had like a whole collection. They got a fragmentary femur, an ulna, some vertebral centrum fragments, and some rib fragments.
Nice. So you can paint a pretty good picture then of this sauropod.
Yeah. It is a little bit confusing to me, though, because I keep wanting to refer to it as Cooper, but really Cooper is just the one that's the holotype.
Right.
And the rest of them are just Australotitan. I keep wanting to say Australotitan, like Australia, but I think it should be Australotitan, right?
I think it's like Australotitan, like Australovenator.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I've been trying to do that, but the whole time I was reading it, I was saying it in my head a different way.
So it's hard
for me to get right.
Yeah. But yeah, so Cooper is that one individual has the nickname of Cooper, but then other specimens that are found to be the same as Cooper, that are found to be the same species as Cooper, they're together, they're known as Australotitan.
Yeah. And technically, Cooper is the holotype of Australotitan. So if there are differences in the future, those just will stop being Australotitan. In addition to dinosaur fossils, they also found some really pretty fossilized ferns, as well as some wood that was fossilized, and some sauropod tracks.
Do they think they're from Cooper?
I don't know.
Probably too hard to tell.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell exactly how close it was. It wasn't like Cooper was walking and then like died at the end of the trackway.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little different than that. I think we actually talk about that with Dean Lomax a little bit.
Yeah.
Track maker.
Not sauropods, but other animals.
Yeah. Yeah, rarely happens, but it could be. And I think the fossilized tracks, they described as partial tracks, so I'm not sure how much detail they can get from them anyway. But there is like a mush part, like it was a heavy enough animal, it was like mushing out a bunch of muck over to the side when it stepped. So yeah, sauropod is a good guess at a minimum. They estimate that Cooper is around 93 to 96 million years old, which puts it at the beginning of the Late Cretaceous.
That's when the big dinosaurs were coming out.
Yeah, the Titanosaurs for sure. And there were some in the early Cretaceous too, but yeah, the Late Cretaceous really got going. The authors talk quite a bit about how they weren't going to give a body size estimate, and how even giving any sort of body size estimate in relation to like femur or humerus circumference is fraught and going to give bad results, so people shouldn't do it. But it is clearly the largest Australian sauropod, and they are comfortable with saying that.
Maybe in later papers, if more fossils are found, they'll come up with something.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're talking about length, like we only have a few partial centrum, like you're not going to be able to estimate its length. You need so many more vertebrae to figure that kind of thing out. But when comparing the humerus, it's by far the biggest of any Australian sauropod. Australotitan is 1.5 meters, or 4 foot 11 inches long.
The humeri?
Yeah, the humerus. So just the upper arm bone alone. That compares to Diamantinosaurus, Savannosaurus, and Wintonotitan, which are all about 1.1 to 1.2 meters long. So you're talking not quite 50% bigger, but like 30 to 40% bigger than any of the other Australian sauropods that have been described. And all three of those are from Winton, Queensland, which is about a one-day drive north of Eromanga. And we know that because we drove the other way from Winton to Eromanga.
In one day.
Yeah. That was the longest, hardest day of driving, though, because there was the most one-lane roads, and there was one segment where the road wasn't a road for like 20 miles, and we were driving on the shoulder because they were reconstructing the road.
Yeah, but it was worth it.
Yeah, I think we made it just before sunset. We were nervous that we weren't going to make it before sunset, and then like kangaroos were going to storm the road, and we were going to destroy our car and kill some kangaroos. But fortunately, they just stood on the side of the road staring at us as the sun was setting, which was very eerie.
Some of them looked sleepy.
Yeah, but some of them looked like they were just like getting ready. They were starting to wake up and getting going. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. So the femur of Australotitan is about 1.9 meters long, or a little bit under 6 foot 3 inches, which is basically my exact height. So that's how big the femur is. That's a very large femur. It's also much longer than any other Australian sauropod, but we don't have as good of comparisons with those. We have better comparison in the humerus. And even bigger than that, so that's Cooper's femur is 1.9 meters, but the complete referred femur from a different Australotitan is estimated to be 2.15 meters, or about 7 foot 1 inches long.
So Cooper was the baby.
Compared to this one, at least. Yeah, so over 2 meters is a rarefied club for femurs in any animal whatsoever. There are only a few sauropods that break that barrier.
Since Cooper is so large, I'm guessing it's probably an adult.
Yeah, I think that's what they're guessing too. I don't remember them. I'm pretty sure they didn't do any histology, but we don't have any great bones. I'm thinking about it because we only have the centrum from the vertebrae, so you can't tell if those are fused. They might be able to tell from the hip bones a little bit if things are fused. They certainly didn't say they think it's a juvenile. But just for one last bone, just for scale, even Australotitan's ulna is over a meter long. It's a very big dinosaur.
So it didn't have to worry about predators, probably.
Probably not. Unless we find some massive Carcharodontosaurid or something.
That would be crazy.
Yeah. They did plot the humerus and femur measurements a few different ways to see where it fits among other sauropods. And basically, it's somewhere in the Footolonkosaurus to Dreadnoughtus ballpark, which are both
very large.
Very large, yeah.
The fear-nothing dinosaur because it was so large.
Yeah. Although I think the authors are skeptical on the weight estimate of Dreadnoughtus because that's estimated at 74 tons, which is a little bit ambitious, I think, as well. Footolonkosaurus is estimated way less at 24 tons. So they're like, it's somewhere in that range, 24 to 74 tons. Like,
that's a wide range.
Yeah, 3x, somewhere in there. But it's huge, right? It's bigger than anything alive today and one of the biggest sauropods for sure.
Well, anything terrestrial alive today, right?
I think so. I'm not really sure how big a whale humerus is. I think they have pretty reduced limb bones since they have the fins. So it's probably still bigger.
I was thinking in terms of weight.
Oh, when I said it was one of the heaviest? Yeah, that's true. And then one last note, the referred Australotitan, so those previous things were about the holotype and Cooper, but that referred one that's even bigger, that 2.15 meter femur, is close to the Argentinosaurus and Patagotitan ballpark, which are basically the largest sauropods that we know about.
So it's right up there with all the giants.
It is. It's definitely, some places we're saying it's definitely in the top 10. I think you could probably say, especially that referred one is probably in the top 5 or maybe even top 3 for largest dinosaurs in the world, and certainly the largest known in Australia.
I think we got hints about that too when we were looking at Cooper's fossils.
Yeah. We're like, how big is it? This looks bigger than the other sauropods. They're like, oh yeah. These are the southern Winton Formation sauropods were certainly much bigger than the northern ones, at least that we found so far. And that means that, yeah, it's probably in the 30 meters very roughly or 100-foot long ballpark, plus or minus 30 feet, I guess, because we really have no idea since we don't have many vertebrae. One of the really cool details about the paper is how they did the research. They relied really heavily on 3D scanned cybertypes.
What is that?
So I think I've mentioned cybertypes once or twice before, but it's basically like how you have a holotype, which is the actual bone in a museum somewhere. And for Cooper, that's the whole collection of those bones are the holotype that are all from the one individual. And that's what Australotitan is. It's Cooper, basically. That's the holotype. But the cybertypes are the original scans of those bones. And it's like you're defining this digital file is the definition of the animal, but in a digital place rather than in a physical bone.
Oh, that's cool. That means other people can easily access it.
Yeah, so they talked about how, like, I can carry around my 7-pound laptop rather than this 1,000+ pound bone. And you could also email it to people across the world. You can also print out copies of it and print out copies of, presumably, hopefully someday, all the cybertypes of similar animals and really make an in-depth comparison. But they added to that by saying we should really color code our cybertypes. And they proposed a system for it with lots of details that sort of eliminate some of the misleading nature of scanned fossils. Basically, they color-coded where pieces are missing, where places are deformed, and where the matrix hasn't been fully removed, so you don't accidentally see a scanned piece of dirt and think that that's a bump on the bone. It's actually just dirt.
Oh, that's good for accuracy.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of other things they included too. But I think it's an amazing idea, and the picture looks so clear. You can look at it and really see like which parts of the bone on that cybertype are like the real bone that are the where you can make a really good comparison. And then the other pieces where it's like, yes, there's information there, but you have to be a lot more cautious when you're making a comparison because it all ends up boiling down into these computer matrices of like, oh, there's a bump here or a bump there. And if the bump is there because part of it's eroded away next to it, it's not nearly as useful. So I love that. And I think if it catches on, it'll be especially useful for these sauropod researchers since
the bones are so heavy.
Yeah, the biggest, heaviest bones. I mean, you need like a forklift for these bones. They're ridiculous. And in case you're wondering, they did a little bit of phylogenetic work to see what it looks like it's related to. It seems like its hips are very similar to Diamantinosaurus and Wintonotitan from the northern Winton Formation. And it also has some similarities in its vertebrae to Savannosaurus, which is also from the northern Winton Formation. So the authors are proposing that all 4 of them, Diamantinosaurus, Wintonotitan, Savannosaurus, and Australotitan, all probably shared a common ancestor, and sometimes that group is called Diamantinosauria. We've seen that a little bit in the past. But they point out that analyses sometimes also include South American or Asian sauropods too. So whether or not they actually started with Diamantinosaurus and, you know, their similar Australian relatives, or if it started somewhere else and there was more back and forth between Australia and other places in Gondwana or even Asia, we don't really know yet for sure. Need more fossils.
Always.
Maybe we'll find out when they describe some more of the Eromanga local sauropods.
Yeah. Speaking of Asian sauropods, paleontologists in Yunnan Province in China found a 70% complete sauropod skeleton.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. They found it in late May, and they think it's a Lufengosaurus based on its tail and thigh bones.
We've got a lot of examples of Lufengosaurus.
Mm-hmm.
But I think 70% is probably still maybe the most complete one. That's a really good one.
Very complete. So it was found in Lufeng. Lufengosaurus lived in the Jurassic. They're estimating this one to be 26 feet or 8 meters long. And they're hoping to find the skull, which, if you already got 70% of it, maybe.
Yeah.
They found it in an area that has soil erosion, so they're trying to dig it out fast. They have these emergency excavations by Dinosaur Fossil Conservation and Research Center.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, we saw Lufengosaurus, I think for the first time at a museum in Hong Kong that was on loan from China. Mm-hmm. And it's really cool. It's one of those like sauropodomorphs where you can really see that it's not quite adapted for the full weight-bearing, massive legs and arms. At that point, they're still sort of like arms. They're not like fully just front legs. But yeah, they're still very clearly a sauropod or a sauropodomorph. Be interesting to see where that one ends up on display, because I'm sure it will. They might just make a new museum for it. It seems they do that a lot in China.
There's so many museums.
Yeah.
And they have so much to show.
They do.
Speaking of museums, well, speaking of exhibits, which often includes museums, in Seattle, Washington, in the U.S., the Habitat Discovery Loop at Woodland Park Zoo has a dinosaur discovery exhibit that's open during the summer. So if you are in the area, you can see 22 life-size animatronic dinosaurs, including a 35-foot-tall Brachiosaurus.
It's a big one.
Oh, we just keep talking about sauropods.
Yeah.
What a day. What a day. Actually, my last bit is all about sauropods, too. So in Waco, Texas, in the U.S., Mayborn Museum has a new exhibit called The World's Largest Dinosaurs. So you can guess where I'm going here. It was created by the American Museum of Natural History. It's all about sauropods.
I think we saw that.
I was wondering about that, and if we did, I think this exhibit has been updated.
Okay.
You can see a Mementosaurus that's 60 feet long and Argentinosaurus among other sauropods. And I can't remember if we saw a Mementosaurus when we saw it. Yeah, we
did.
And you can also see a sauropod heart to show how large it had to be to keep its blood circulating. The whole thing is to give you an idea of how much sauropods ate, how their bodies supplied oxygen.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar. So I remember them projecting on the side of a sauropod the circulatory system of a dinosaur, and next to it, they had this plexiglass cube that was full of leaves, and they were like, this is how much sauropods ate. Mm-hmm. That was at AMNH. So
I remember that, yeah.
Thing.
And I remember it was a special exhibit, but that was almost 10 years ago now, so I couldn't remember all the details.
I think the thing they were projecting on when they were showing the circulatory system might have been Mementosaurus.
Okay.
Because that would be a good one to pick, since they have such a crazy long neck, showing like how far the blood has to go up the neck to come back.
That I remember that, but in the pictures I saw in the Mayborn Museum, it just looked a little different to me.
Yeah.
Which makes me think, I mean, they probably did update it. It's been a while.
Yeah, and that would have, I think, been the first place they had it. So they might, a lot of times they do update things when they send them on the road.
Mm-hmm. So this exhibit's open through September.
It's a good one. I recommend it. And now we're going to go on to our interview with Dean Lomax, but as always, we have an extended version available for our patrons. So if you are one of our Patreon subscribers, then make sure to check out the extended interview in your premium content feed. We are joined this week by Dean Lomax, who's an award-winning paleontologist and currently visiting scientist at the University of Manchester in the UK. And he's written tons of books, including Locked in Time, which looks at animal behavior through 50 extraordinary fossils. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
So I guess jumping into the Locked in Time book, I mean, we want to talk about all you've done so much other work that's amazing, but the Locked in Time book. I wanted to start. Can you tell us about the paleo art for the book?
Yeah, absolutely I can. So the paleo artist for the book is a really brilliant guy and world-renowned paleo artist called Bob Nichols. And I invited him to do the artwork for Locked in Time. This must be about probably 3 or 4 years ago. I've been working on this idea for more than a decade. And I've known Bob for about a decade. And he was super, super enthusiastic about the idea and the concept of Locked in Time by looking at behavior from fossils. And he jumped at the chance to work with me on this. And he working with the 50 fossils and my interpretations of them and looking at the scientific research around these 50 fossils, all 50 fossils included in Locked in Time, he's brought to life, and in black and white, I might add. And they are spectacular. I mean, I have to say that, right? But they are genuinely spectacular. They really are. And the cover art as well is in color. But he is a true expert and as I say, a renowned paleo artist.
Yeah, there's so many interesting, well, obviously interesting fossils, but like things that we don't even think about. Like I think one of the last ones was fossilized farts, for example.
I feel like that one is that's certainly in there as one of the favorites for most people who have read the book at this point, or at least have seen the content. So like, dude, you included fossil farts. I said, yeah, it's a real thing as well. And it's one of the things that, of course, as I talk about in the book, and as I'm sure the two of you know, everybody does it. We all do this. Lots of animals fart in the animal kingdom. Not all animals, but lots of animals fart as well. And it's a genuine thing that I've included in the book about fossilized farts. Probably people listening to this will be thinking, what?
Yeah.
Fossilized farts, how do they preserve? Have you got a T-Rex laid in rips somewhere? but no, this is to do with fossilized insects in amber that have been preserved once they've been trapped by the amber, and the sort of buildup of gases inside their gut has then released gas. They've released the farts contained inside the amber.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I couldn't think of how it would happen. Yeah. That's crazy.
And there's even people who study this. There's what's it called? Study of flatulence.
That is right. Yeah, study of flatulence, flatology. I remember looking that up as well, going a few years ago, and I was like, wow, imagine saying, this is what you do, this is what your specialism is, flatology. And I guess paleoflatology on this in this case.
Yeah, that's even crazier. Not a lot of specimens to go by on that field.
Yeah. There's a quote in there, and I feel like I have to say, because my favorite dinosaurs are sauropods, and Garrett likes the ankylosaurs. We like to have a little back and forth, but you have this quote in there. It says, if you want to impress somebody with a dinosaur fact, look no further than the sauropod dinosaurs. Take that, Garrett.
That's one for Team Sabrina there.
Yeah. It really was. Although, but then Garrett will get me for this next bit, because there's the part about the Mementosaurus pits, that soft mud where they walk, that became kind of death traps for smaller animals. That was fascinating to think about.
Yeah, they're incredible fossils, and I remember actually when the study was announced, going back over a decade, I think it was now, and I saw it was picked up quite widely in the news, that you have these enormous, basically footprints that have been made by a Mementosaurus or a Mementosaurus-like sauropod, leaving its footprints in this sticky mud, and as it's lifted its feet out of the mud, that they've left behind like column-like impressions of the feet, and then eventually they filled up with water and mud, and then you've had other animals which have unknowingly walked over this this death trap, and then they sunk into this, and then the ones that couldn't get out, they've been preserved inside these dinosaur footprints, which is such a mind-blowing fossil.
It is.
And it is, and it even includes, which is what's really cool, not only does it include smaller animals, which include, say there's a little crocodile in there, but there's multiple individuals of small dinosaurs, including a really early ancestor of Tyrannosaurus rex, a thing called Guanlong Wukai. Mm-hmm. So you have that preserved in one of these footprints.
So I guess bad for those dinosaurs, but the sauropods did us a favor. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like to see it. It's funny because obviously people don't really necessarily think of, say, sauropods of killers, right? So in this case, they have unintentionally led to the death of multiple other animals.
They're like pre-paleontologists. They're setting us up for future paleontological work.
And then there was, more on the sauropod theme, the Wyoming Dinosaur Center and its Something Interesting site. That was, which really was something interesting.
Yeah, in terms of the SI, the Something Interesting site, it has a deep sort of personal meaning and deep personal connection for me, because when I was 18, this is in 2008, I'd finished school, high school, and I didn't have the grades, the qualifications to actually go to university. And I also didn't have the money to go to university. So I thought, well, what can I do to really get into paleontology? I looked around, and it seemed like the best way for me to gain sort of first-hand experience was to literally go and dig up dinosaurs in America. That's where everything seemed to be happening. And look, short story here is that I ended up raising up enough money by selling, would you believe, my childhood Star Wars collection.
Wow.
of action figures. I know, still a little part of me dies every time I say that. And but doing so, I went out to Wyoming. I went to work with the amazing Wyoming Dinosaur Center. And this was the first time where I was introduced to this dig site, to SI. And I walked out onto the dig site, and I was blown away by this incredible dig site full of lots of dinosaur bones, primarily of sauropods like Carnivorous, but probably some diplodocids there as well, like Diplodocus bones. And throughout the site, there was lots of fossilized mud as well, where it was like a choppy kind of setting where you've got lots of footprints left behind by lots of sauropods, probably as part of a massive herd. And now that already is really interesting, but the most intriguing thing about this is that there is evidence there of effectively it being an Allosaurus kill site. So you have the scattered remains of a juvenile Carcharodontosaurus at this site that had been dined upon by multiple Allosaurus, ranging from juveniles to adults. And we know that because we have probably working out hundreds and hundreds of teeth of an Allosaurus that has been found there. And no Allosaurus bones. So we know that they were there literally feeding on the carcass.
Wow.
That's really cool. I'm sure it's still painful that you sold your collection, but obviously it worked out in terms of your paleontology career. And is the Something Interesting site kind of what sparked the idea for this book? Because you said this book had been years in the making.
Yeah, in part it was actually to do with the Something Interesting site, but it was another fossil at the Wyoming Dinosaur Center that really gave me the idea for this. So I can still remember this vividly like it was yesterday. On my very first day at the Wyoming Dinosaur Center, I was given a tour of the museum displays by another volunteer called Jordi. And Jordi was from Spain, and we had a good connection, both being from Europe, and we were chatting away about what it's like to be at this museum and his past experience. He'd been there a few weeks, and he said, Dean, this museum has some world-renowned fossils here, some spectacular fossils from all across the world. And whilst he showed me through the collection and through the displays, he showed me one specimen of a gigantic chunk of limestone, which came from Solnhofen in Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Came from a town near Solnhofen in Germany, a place called Eichstätt. And he said to me, Dean, just take a moment and look at this surface. Well, as part of this large block, there was, the only way I could describe it, as part of the surface, there was like, it appeared like trampling, like some sort of trace. And I just thought, oh, that's weird. And he said, now follow that. And I followed it for 9.7 meters, so over 33 feet. And at the end of this trace was a tiny horseshoe crab. And I was blown away. This was an entire death trace made by this tiny horseshoe crab, 12.7 centimeters long.
Wow.
Preserved all, right there. You had this entire moment in time captured. And I was just, utterly blown away. And I thought, instantly, my reaction was, I've never seen a fossil anything like this anywhere in the world. And it just gave me this idea right then to think about, I wonder if there's more fossils where you can learn about behaviors. And funnily enough, for that particular specimen, I ended up describing a few years later with one of the then museum paleontologists, Chris Racy. So that really was where the idea and the concept of locked in time came from.
Wow. Yeah, it's literally locked in time.
Yeah, right?
That is so cool.
Yeah, so I guess just for our listeners and hopefully soon to be readers, what's kind of the general concept of the book, what they can expect from Locked in Time.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. Locked in Time is effectively a unique book that focuses on prehistoric animal behavior. And in this case, it's told through 50 of the most extraordinary specimens ever discovered. And this is based on the direct evidence as well contained in the fossils. And there's very little room for sort of interpretation with this. And so it effectively provides an unprecedented glimpse at the real-life behaviors of prehistoric animals. I guess for the two of you as well, when it comes to dinosaurs and prehistoric animals, nothing excites us more than their behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Working out how and what they ate, whether they cared for their young and how they reproduced and, and everything more. And you can watch dinosaur documentaries today or see dinosaur movies, Jurassic Park and so on, and it's the behavior that really captures our interest, right? And so with this book, that was a key thing I wanted to help others to understand, that we do have extraordinary fossils that do provide us with direct evidence of behavior, which I brought together in 5 chapters, one which looks at sex, another which looks at parental care and communities, one that looks at moving and making homes, which is primarily trace fossils and their makers, and fighting, biting, and feeding. And then the last one is kind of a catch-all for all the other oddities. It's called Unusual Happenings. And, I guess my take-home for Locked in Time is that I really hope it will encourage readers to look at fossils and prehistoric life with an entirely new perspective, helping to show that these once living, breathing animals are as real as you and me.
Definitely. And you mentioned the chapter on trace fossils, but I think trace fossils come throughout. Even you talk about like the dinosaur mating dances or different kinds of tracks and things like that.
Exactly. And this is it. This is why I find it so fascinating to look at behavior in fossils, because you can learn so much more. And I always like to point out with this sort of stuff is that, obviously the three of us would, and everybody listening to this would agree that, say, a Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton is amazing, right? Absolutely is, and you can learn so much. But then if you had a T-Rex where it tells you that bit more about its behavior and its life, it just makes it feel, more alive. It makes it feel real to you. You can see these things then as living, breathing, real animals.
Yeah, absolutely. And things that, there's the ones that confirm what you already thought, like, okay, yeah, there's bite marks on a Triceratops, and that's interesting. But then you find something like, completely unexpected, like I would almost put the fighting dinosaurs in that category, where it's almost equal sized predator and prey going at it together, and you're like, why are they fighting? That doesn't seem like the ones we would pick in the ecosystem to be fighting.
yeah, exactly. And that's the one of the coolest specimens as well in the book, the famous fighting dinosaurs, right? That I remember seeing that as a child and being truly captivated by the story it tells of Velociraptor fighting with a Protoceratops, and then they're then together forever, locked in time. It's such a cool fossil.
Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorites too. It's so amazing. Yeah. For some reason, though, I think it's not that well known in like pop culture. I think maybe because they're not that big of dinosaurs. If it was like a Triceratops and a T-Rex stuck together, everyone would probably know about it. But since they're smaller dinosaurs,
I'd say it's well known among dinosaur people, though.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, I agree with that though, Garrett. Big time. It's funny. I remember seeing it in, I think, TV documentaries and books and that. But yeah, generally speaking, a lot of people, general public, I guess, who like dinosaurs, have never heard about that. Although there is the one recently, the recent discovery of the
dueling dinosaurs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the dueling dinosaurs, and that was one which I have mentioned that very briefly in this book. But of course, I kind of reserve judgment on that until it's officially published, because of course they may not be actually dueling.
Yeah,
you got to reserve judgment for now.
I'm excited to see what they find.
But potentially could be like a full scale or much larger scale, I should say, version of those fighting dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole Nanotyrannus thing with it too.
Yeah, precisely. Oh, yeah. I imagine it's gonna generate a lot of research, and also, which is great for the science, a lot of publicity too.
Do you have plans for a sequel?
Yeah, so I originally, for this book, it was originally 100 fossils. And in the end, it just turned out it was going to be too much of a tall task, and to try and really to do every single fossil justice. And so the decision was made to make it 50 fossils. And then, depending on, fingers crossed, I'm crossing my fingers right now that people hopefully like the book and buy the book to learn about these fossils, that it may lead to a second, which would be fantastic, because some of the other examples that I'd love to include, one, for example, thinking about off the top of my head, is that there's evidence of giant saber-toothed cats, like Smilodon, of them fighting together and using their big canine teeth to literally puncture the top of the skull of one another. And so that's such an awesome fossil, right? And we had to cut so many cool fossils out of the potential, of having the hundreds. So yeah, there is plans to have effectively a volume 2, and we're hoping that'll happen.
Cool.
Nice.
Your path to your paleontology career is a pretty interesting one, and maybe not typical of what we usually hear. Could you tell maybe some tips for people who might be interested in getting into this field?
Yeah, of course, Sabrina. Yeah, so I talked briefly about my kind of journey going out to Wyoming, selling the Star Wars collection and things, and raising enough money to effectively, what I wanted to do was just gain the first-hand experience. And that was just really important for me because I didn't have the grades and I didn't have the finances to go to university here in the UK. I decided that I just needed to get my hands dirty, literally get out onto dig sites, be around paleontologists, and just literally just be a sponge and absorb as much as I could. And working with the Wyoming Dinosaur Center, volunteering there in 2008 for almost 4 months, it gave me the experience I needed and the information that I needed to be able to say, right, okay, here's my foot on the ladder. Now I need to go here and I need to do this, I need to do that. And it allowed me to just continue to work out what was right for me as an individual, because I just felt, university and the way I learn is just it doesn't really suit me. I'm much one of those people who has to kind of get out there and do things, and that's the way I really learn. And so I originally held off university. I never actually did an undergraduate degree. And so I started writing from this trip in Wyoming in 2008. I actually began writing my first scientific paper literally off the back of that in September 2008 at the age of 18. And that was after the discovery of an ichthyosaur at my local hometown museum of Doncaster Museum and Art Gallery here in the UK. And I began volunteering there when I was 18. Again, it's all important, and I really must stress how important it is to gain experience. Even if you were like me, I was working jobs that I really didn't like. I was working as a barman, bar staff, waiting on people. I was doing sort of delivery services and things like that. And so I was putting all the money I was earning, the bits of money that I was earning, I was putting into volunteering at the museum. And just to gain that experience, because I saw the bigger picture of what that could lead to down the line. And eventually, working with Doncaster Museum, volunteering there, to cut the story on that short, was that I rediscovered this collection of about 12,000 fossils. There was no paleontologist at this museum, and to kind of make the point with this, which is amusing, it's also scary, but it's amusing, is that the ichthyosaur they had, the museum staff, that, again, to be fair, they didn't have a geologist or a paleontologist, but they thought it was a plaster copy of an original. And it used to be used in the education department, actively used in the education department by children. And so you imagine this 18-year-old kid who's just come back from America and who's like, I like dinosaurs and stuff, and saying to the museum, this is actually real. And even said it looks like there's stomach contents potentially preserved between the ribs there, which as it turns out there was. And that specimen formed the basis of my first peer-reviewed paper, which I'd begun writing almost there and then, 2008, and that it was eventually published in 2010. And so by doing that, I started writing lots of papers, researching fossils, getting as much experience volunteering as possible, and then really, as I say, worked my way up the ladder to the point where I surpassed doing a bachelor's degree, and I ended up doing a master's, which over here we have a thing called an MPhil. I don't know if you have it in the US. And MPhil, it's called a master's of philosophy, but it's in paleontology. And then I went on to do my PhD. And so, I guess now over the years, I've published nearly, I think, 50 scientific papers, and most of them have been on ichthyosaurs, and it's been fun.
Awesome.
Nice. So that fossil that you discovered was real after all those years of kids handling them and hopefully not damaging it too much. What did it end up being? What was it, a really significant find?
It really was. It was the specimen that really sparked my career in paleontology, especially academia. And funnily enough, I ended up working with a world-renowned paleontologist on marine reptiles, somebody called Professor Judy Macere, who serendipitously I'd met in the summer of 2008 and 2009 in Wyoming, who was visiting from New York. So it was really all by chance. And I worked with Judy, and Judy and I put our heads together, studied the specimen, and actually determined that it was new to science. So this was an entirely new species, which we got to name, and we actually named it after Mary Anning as Ichthyosaurus anningae, which translates to Mary Anning's fish lizard, the only ichthyosaur ever named after Mary Anning.
Wow. Yeah, you'd think
good name.
Someone else would have named an ichthyosaur after Mary Anning over all these years, but
yeah, right. After 2 centuries.
Yeah, you righted the wrong, so that's good. Awesome.
And then in addition to doing research and publishing books, you're a scientific consultant on shows, and you've co-hosted, and you've also had appearances in documentaries and shows and done like all kinds of cool scientific communication and outreach.
Oh, thanks, Sabrina. Yeah, that's become a large part of my work is the science communication side of things, and it's from working with, say, school groups, school children, and talking about paleontology and really getting them excited about fossils and dinosaurs, right up to co-hosting and presenting TV shows. The main one I did over here in the UK was a program in 2015 called Dinosaur Britain that was presented by a presenter over here called Ellie Harrison, who's really brilliant. She's known for various different TV shows over here. And I effectively co-hosted the show with her. It was a 2-part primetime series that aired here. And it was based around one of my books, Dinosaurs of the British Isles. And so it was one of those things where Dinosaurs of the British Isles had taken me 3.5 years to write. I didn't get paid to do the book. It was a real labor of love, but then it led to doing this amazing thing where it reached genuinely millions of people who could then learn about dinosaurs found here in the British Isles. And then that's led to more TV programs, TV projects, and working as a consultant on various things. And, it's really just humbling that other people come to me now and ask to be part of TV shows and actually talk about science. And yeah, it is. It's become such a big part of my work. That, and I guess, I should say field work too. I also lead lots of kind of field expeditions and digs and things too.
Wow.
Cool.
Do you sleep?
I probably need to sleep more. That is for sure.
There's one film I know you consulted on recently. It's that short film Sea Dragon. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that. But it just came out, right, at the film festival.
It did, yeah. It's a really, really neat idea as well. And the team behind that have done such a great job. They'd come to me with the concept. They'd already put it together of effectively telling the story of Mary Anning, who at the moment is obviously incredibly popular with a lot of stuff, which I'm really happy about. Mary Anning was my childhood hero, right? Mm-hmm. And I was fascinated by her story as a kid. And I guess for her, she was one of the people who I really got into paleontology. But with this idea, they came to me saying, look, we want to do something very different with Mary Anning's story. We want to tell the story of Mary and Joseph's first major discovery of the ichthyosaur, which is what Mary and Joseph made this amazing discovery in between 1811 and 1812. As it goes, and as what we know from direct evidence of this, of writings, is that actually Joseph, a slightly older brother, he found the skull of, at the time, of course, they didn't know what it was because, there was no such thing as an ichthyosaur. Nobody knew what they were, right? And they found this giant skull, over 1 meter long. And they had it taken out of the ground. And then the following year, when Mary was 12 years old, she found the rest of the partial skeleton that was preserved. And so the concept of this is kind of, how did Mary and Joseph go about finding this? What did they do at the time? And it kind of paints young Mary, in a really cool light, that it shows her that she, even as a child, she knew that these things were important and different enough that she didn't want them to be taken away. And she learned her trade, Mary, by going out with her father, who actually was a carpenter, and in his sort of part-time, his spare time, he used to take Mary and Joseph out on the beach and look for fossils. And that's really where Mary's story sort of came from. And so I think I'm confident Sea Dragon will do really, really well. And I'm just thrilled to have been part of it. And it does show a different side to Mary Anning that often people are not quite aware of.
I'm seeing a lot of parallels between your career and Mary Anning's career. Between starting in the field and focusing on plesiosaurs. Ichthyosaurs. Yep. All that stuff.
Yeah, on plesiosaurs too. I probably shook up a bit on plesiosaurs too, but no, I appreciate that, Garrett. That's very kind of you to say, and a few people have said that before, and it's interesting because you look at Mary Anning's story as well. She comes from a very poor working class family background, and she, obviously at the time, of course, she was a woman, and so she wasn't allowed to go to school. She wasn't allowed to go and get have a career. She wasn't allowed to go and do anything. Nobody really expected her to achieve much, and so the fact that she become this real powerhouse paleontologist is truly incredible during the time as well. Again, a very religious time, and I guess, like you say, maybe there is some kind of parallelisms with my kind of journey into science too. And I actually, from a personal point of view, I actually come from quite a poor family background as well, very working class, and say never had the finances and things to go to university, and kind of overcome many different obstacles and overcome adversity over the years in my own career, from I guess people not nowhere near as bad as Marianne, I must admit, but from people saying, oh, Dean, you'll never become a paleontologist, you'll never do this, or you're not a good enough scientist and things. And of course these things are they're difficult to stomach. It's difficult to swallow sometimes, but you stick on at it, and you continue to follow your passion, and you stay dedicated and follow your enthusiasm, and work incredibly hard is what I always say to people when people ask. I have a lot of people of different ages, younger and older, who say, I love paleontology. I want to get into paleontology. What do I do? And I always just say, find what's right for you and what works for you. For what works for me or what works for another person isn't necessarily what works for you too. So it's important to work out what's right for you as an individual and to create and follow your own path.
Yeah, that's really inspirational.
It is.
Yeah, cheers.
You've also named a dinosaur, which I'm pretty sure we covered on our show. I'd be surprised if we didn't. Para-avian theropod Hesperon Authorities. Could you tell us a little bit about that discovery?
Yeah, Hesperon Authorities was a really neat discovery. So to paint the picture of this thing, it's really tiny. It's like the size of a chicken. It's a really, really small dinosaur. And it was found, which is hilarious, it was found at the side of one of the biggest dinosaurs ever, an example of Supersaurus. And so imagine like enormous dinosaur, giant sauropods, Sabrina's favorites. And then you've got this tiny little Hesperon Authorities, a little theropod at the side of it. And it was found in Wyoming in 2001. And strangely enough, I actually saw the skeleton on my first visit in 2008. And I mean, this is right at the beginning of my career. I had no idea how to, interpret the skeleton of a dinosaur. I had no concept of even what a scientific paper was, right? So I'd seen the skeleton and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And the team then at the museum are made of Bill Wall, Dave Lovelace, and Scott Hartman right back in 2008. They were like, yeah, this is a cool dinosaur. It's new to science completely, and we want to publish it at some point. Well, sadly, that didn't happen. And it was only until a few years later, many years later, that I think it was 2017 maybe, I'd kind of sent out a generic email to everybody saying, hey, we should really describe this dinosaur. It is definitely new to science, and it had been nicknamed as the Laurie specimen for such a long time. And people in the paleontology community knew about this dinosaur. And so we said, yeah, let's do this. And so Scott Hartman, he actually led the study on this. I went out to the University of Wisconsin to join up with Scott, with Dave Lovelace, and with Bill Wall. And the specimen was actually brought out to the University of Wisconsin, where we had it scanned, and we spent basically a full week looking at the bones and writing the entire paper and comparing it to other animals, comparing it to literature of other described little theropods. And it was a real pleasure to describe this little thing. It's effectively like a mini version of like a velociraptor, right? It's that type of animal, and it's so cool to name it. And I should say that the species name, so it's called, the full name is Hesperon Authorities meisleri. The species name is after the Meisler family, Howard and Helen Meisler in Wyoming, whose property it was found upon, and they were really generous with their time and allowing the members of the Wyoming Dinosaur Center and other museums to collect on their property. They donated the specimen and even gave money for the museum and for research purposes too. And I should say that also the last thing would be just say again, we actually crowdfunded part of the research for this through experiment.com, and we managed to get some funding. So there was a lot of really kind people who gave us money towards the research, and we were so thankful for that.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's
crowdfunding
cool.
is great.
It is, especially when it works.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't always work. Cool.
So for our listeners then, where is the best place to find out more about you and your work? Probably online.
If you'd like to learn more about my work, you can visit my website, which is just simply dinarlomax.co.uk. But I'm very active on social media, on Instagram and Twitter and I guess Facebook as well. And my accounts are just at Dinar Lomax. And so if you ever have any fossil questions or you want some of your fossils identified or something like that, I'm always happy to to come back with some questions and answers for you. Not a problem. But I just hope that you enjoy my my path and my kind of experience in paleontology, and that you find it interesting, and hopefully perhaps it even inspires your listeners too.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. That was really awesome.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks again, Dean. We covered a lot of topics that I did not expect to get into.
Yep.
It was a lot of fun.
And now on to our dinosaur of the day, Sauroniops, which was a request from Tyrant King via our Patreon and Discord, so thanks. It was a Carcharodontosaurus theropod that lived in the Late Cretaceous in what is now Morocco in the Kem Kem Beds. It looks a lot like Carcharodontosaurus. It's got that elongated skull and sharp teeth, but it had a kind of a dome on its head. Interesting.
So it's like sort of like a cross between a Pachycephalosaur and a Carcharodontosaurus?
In the paleoart, it does not look Pachycephalosaur-like.
So what kind of dome does it have?
It's more like a bump on its head.
Okay.
So small-ish.
It's important to other Sauroniops, but not so obvious to other animals, maybe.
Well, it's got this thick vaulted skull roof and then a bump on the head. The holotype is MPM 2594. It's a nearly complete left frontal bone, part of the skull, which is just above the eye socket. That's what the description is based on. And it's described as thick and broad. And the fossil was about 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters long. Someone had bought the fossil from a Moroccan fossil dealer and then donated it to the Museo Paleontologico di Montevarchi in Italy. The fossil had been collected by locals, so the exact location of where it was found was unknown. Sauroniops was described and named in 2012 by Andrea Cao, Marco Dalla Vecchia, and Matteo Fabri. When they were first describing this fossil in 2012, the authors said, quote, "Although the combination of features present is unique and should support the institution of a new species, pending more complete specimens, we feel it would be inappropriate to erect a new taxon." End quote. But then later in that year, they reanalyzed the fossil and found it was unique enough to be named.
I like it when people are cautious about naming new dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm. They decided to reanalyze it because several papers showed that Carcharodontosaurs had distinct frontal bones, and that could be used to tell them apart.
Mm.
And they said in the 2012 paper, quote, "Due to the numerous autapomorphies in their skeletons, Carcharodontosaurs can be identified even from isolated bones." And they said that the type specimens for Eocarcharia, Carcharodontosaurus iguadensis, and Veteropristosaurus were unique enough to be named from isolated bones. The type species is Sauroniops pachytholus. And being a Carcharodontosaurid, it was carnivorous and bipedal. You might notice from the name, Sauron, the genus name means Sauron eye, and it's named after the character Sauron from Lord of the Rings.
Nice.
That's because the only known fossil is from above the eye socket.
Oh, that's funny. Like the Sauron Tower with the big eyeball.
Mm-hmm. And then the species name means thick dome.
So they did it is a little bit like Pachycephalosaurs because they have the same pachy in it.
That's true. I guess when I was looking at different paleo art, it just I have a vision in my head of how thick the Pachycephalosaurus dome is, and it's a little different.
Yeah, it's not nearly as wide. It's not like the whole head feature. It's like a smaller, I think your bump description was apt.
Yeah. Sauroniops was originally thought to be a derived member of Carcharodontosauridae, but the later 2012 paper, the one that named it, found it to be a basal Carcharodontosaurid and related to Eocarcharia.
That is confusing because usually you put the author's name and the year to name a paper, but they talked about it twice in the same year with the same authors.
Yep. So you got to be extra specific.
Yeah.
Sauroniops lived at the same time and place as Carcharodontosaurus. Compared to other theropods found in the Kem Kem Beds, the frontal bone was only known in Carcharodontosaurus. But it had this small dome that protruded from the middle of the fossil. So this bump on the head could be for display or headbutting, but it's really hard to know for sure based on the one fossil.
I guess nowadays that when they think that Pachycephalosaurs might not have even used their heads for bumping, this one may not have as well.
Yeah.
At least not at a full, charge sort of thing.
Yeah, true. The nasofrontal suture of Sauroniops extended along 40% of the frontal length, so the nasal bone was contacting the frontal bone for over 40% of the frontal length. As you can imagine, because it's just the one bone around the eye, it's really hard to estimate the body length for Sauroniops. But based on the length, width, and thickness of the skull bone, the specimen was found to be similar in size to the frontal bones of really big Carcharodontosaurid specimens with well-preserved skulls. And based on that, they estimated Sauroniops to be 33 to 39 feet or 10 to 12 meters long. The holotype is thought to be an adult based on the size of the frontal being about the same size or larger than the size of frontals in adult Carcharodontosaurus. As you can imagine, because there's only the one bone, there's some debate over the validity of Sauroniops.
Yeah.
A 2020 study by Nizar Ibrahim and others found Sauroniops to be a junior synonym of Carcharodontosaurus saharicus. They looked at the neotype skull of Carcharodontosaurus saharicus and found the frontal of Sauroniops to be 60% the size of the frontal of Carcharodontosaurus saharicus and said, quote, "This size disparity casts in a new light what amount to minor differences between these specimens."
Yeah, and then you get into the whole, was it just a younger version of the same thing with some subtle differences because it's young?
So they found that the unique features of Sauroniops were not different enough from Carcharodontosaurus saharicus. Andrea Cao, however, did not agree with the synonymization.
That often happens when people finally put their nickel down and say, I think this is a valid new species. It's hard. It can be hard to unring that bell.
Yeah, so maybe there will be future papers about this dinosaur.
Hopefully future fossils are found.
Mm-hmm. Although what if they only find the bone over the other eye?
That would be funny. And before we get into our fun fact, I have a quick correction from last week. I think last week when I was talking about the Microceratops Microceratus mix-up in Jurassic Park, I misspoke and said that they were calling it Microceratus when they should have called it Microceratops. But Microceratops is the one that was previously named for a species of wasp or a genus of wasp. So it changed to Microceratus. So in Jurassic Park, they were incorrectly calling it Microceratops, which was a wasp. And they should have said Microceratus, which is a dinosaur.
Oops.
Yeah. But that didn't change until 2008, as someone pointed out to us. So you can't really judge the book from almost 20 years before that.
Mm-hmm.
But the 25th anniversary, they could have updated it. So now onto this fun fact, which is becoming more of a fun quiz Sabrina, because that's more fun for me.
I see.
So this time I want you to guess how many dinosaurs end in O-Titan or A-Titan, as in like Patagotitan
Mm-hmm.
or Australotitan.
Wintenotitan, a nanotitan.
You stumbled onto one of the ones that isn't a titanosaur.
Right. Because that happens. Let me think. Most dinosaurs end with saurus.
Mm-hmm. You like Savannasaurus, even though it's a titanosaur.
This might be a second most common ending. Oh no, there's raptor.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. I'll give you that clue.
Maybe not second, but yeah, pretty high up. Okay. Ooh, I'm trying to remember all the dinosaur of the days I've done, but it's hard to remember 340 something off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm just going to throw a number out there. 42.
Yeah, you're pretty close. The answer is 30.
Ooh,
Yeah, you're within like 30%.
that's not bad.
That is not bad at all. Yeah, it felt really common to me too, because I wanted to, when I saw Australotitan, I was like, oh, that's like Patagotitan. Oh, it's also like Wintenotitan. Oh, it's also like, like kept thinking of more and more. And a lot of them were pretty recent. So I was wondering, like, is this a new thing? Is it an old thing? And just how common is it? So I went through and I tried to find every dinosaur I could that ends in O-Titan or A-Titan. There are other ones that end in like Titanus and things like that, but I just wanted to have something clean that has the same sort of feel to it. So yeah, there are 30 total dinosaurs.
What would you have guessed before you looked it up?
A lot less. I probably would have guessed a dozen. I would have been a lot farther out. I guess a dozen is just what I guessed for everything, because that's what I guessed last week before looking it up. But there are 3 that aren't Titanosaur forms, and I'm also being a little bit generous there, because usually when people say Titanosaur, they mean in Titanosauria, which is a more selective group. But Titanosaur forms include more dinosaurs. For example, Brachiosaurids are Titanosaur forms, but they're not true Titanosaurs. So the 3 that aren't Titanosaur forms are Anatotitan, like you guessed when you were going through in your head the different...
I've got hadrosaurs on the brain.
Yeah.
Even though we talk so much about sauropods.
Yes. I really like Anatotitan as a name because it means giant duck, which is just such a great name for a hadrosaur.
Mm-hmm.
But that later got synonymized with Edmontosaurus because it's an Edmontosaurus. Then there's Australotitan, which translates to giant swan, which is also a hadrosaur. It's pretty enjoyable. And then there's Tyrannotitan, which I translate as Titan Tyrant. And I think that's because it's a Carcharodontosaurid, which presumably is named after its food.
Oh, must be a big one then to go after Titanosaurus.
Yeah, it's like a full-size Carcharodontosaurid. So like Carcharodontosaurus or like Giganotosaurus. You know, it's one of those big ones. And they found a whole bunch of teeth. I think they said 50 plus teeth around a Titanosaur.
Ooh.
Which is,
I wonder if it was a juvenile. That's why it became prey.
Because if it was an adult, it wouldn't have been able to be eaten.
Yeah, unless it was sick.
Yeah, or if it was just a really aggressive or maybe more than one Carcharodontosaurid. And some of the adults in Patagonia, too, weren't that big for sauropods. But anyway, back to Titanosaur forms, because that's the more interesting. It's not really as interesting. But the name, I think, should be reserved for Titanosaur forms probably in the future. I think Anatotitan gets a pass since it was only named 2 years after Giraffatitan. And Giraffatitan is the oldest example I could find. It was named in 1988, which is a lot later than I expected. I would have thought this like O-Titan, A-Titan ending had been more established, but Giraffatitan. So well done, Gregory S. Paul, for coming up with that. Gondwanatitan was the only other one I could find named in the 1900s. The other 26 were all named this century.
That tracks with the pace of dinosaur discovery.
I don't know. I mean, it hasn't been 26 out of 27 or 28 of sauropods that were named this century. It should be like 2/3 if the naming is even. But you're right. It does show how much the pace has picked up. But the detail I stumbled onto that blew my mind when I was doing this is that our podcast has been around for most of the titanosaurs on this list. 14 of them are since 2014.
See, that's why we keep talking about sauropods. Keep finding more.
It's just crazy. I can't believe that our podcast has been around for most of the dinosaurs that end in O-Titan or A-Titan.
Started the podcast at a good time, I guess.
Yeah, it's crazy. The first one that we covered on our show, at least in the news segment, was Patagotitan in episode 142, which means that like all of those actually happened in basically the second half of our show. To this, it's very frequent that these come up. Mm-hmm. We actually missed one in the very beginning. We missed Waco Titan in 2016.
We were still getting our groove, I guess.
We were, yeah. Interestingly, almost all of the dinosaurs that end in O-Titan or A-Titan were named after places until about 2 years ago when they're all named after like people and all sorts of different things. Mm-hmm. But I think that's probably because all of those places already had blank titans named after them, which Australotitan is sort of a nice return back to that.
Or Australotitan.
Oh, yeah. Although there was already Wintonatitan. So even though there are 17 places with titanosaurs named after them in that format of place titan, Australotitan is only the third one that's named after a country. The others are Brasilotitan or Brasilotitan and Angolotitan, named after Brazil and Angola. But there are some other ones which are named after really large regions, and I drew the boundary line at larger than Great Britain, which is like roughly 80,000 square miles, but there's nothing close to that. So you could draw the line at 100,000 or 200,000 and give you the same results. And in increasing size, Wintonatitan, the Winton Formation is probably bigger than Great Britain. Then there's Patagotitan, so Patagonia, Europotitan, named after Europe.
Whole continent. Oh, yeah. I guess Australotitan is also technically a whole continent.
That's true. Then Siberotitan, Siberia is bigger than Europe, which is kind of crazy. There's Gondwanatitan, the entire supercontinent of Gondwana gets its own titan. And then Oceanotitan.
The biggest one.
It's just named after the Atlantic Ocean. So yes, there are a lot of dinosaurs that end in this titan, and we've been around for most of them. How cool is that?
That is cool.
Also, when I was a kid, I don't remember ever seeing these. It was all like Brachiosaurus. Like, there wasn't anything that ended in Titan.
It was all Saurus.
Yeah.
And Raptor.
Back in the 90s and the 80s, that was all the rage. It wasn't until later we got all the Titans.
Well, you also had Maiasaura.
That's true. I didn't hear about Giraffatitan until way later either. I think Brachiosaurus sort of cemented its place as that tall, upright one, and then especially with Jurassic Park.
Yep. Oh, Ceratops, too. That was also big.
Oh, true. Yeah.
I wonder if you could get to a point where you could tell somebody's age based on the types of dinosaurs they named if you asked them to name a dinosaur.
That's a good point. Or favorite dinosaur. There's definitely going to be like a Jurassic Park focus. Like anybody who says Velociraptor is probably a Jurassic Park era kid. T-Rex, though, has been the favorite since like 1918 or something.
Yeah, that one's just classic.
Yeah. And that's what most people say. And that could be from any reason. It could be from going to a museum or Jurassic Park or a book.
Fantasia. Yeah.
But if you said like Maiasaura or any of these newer ones.
Well, Maiasaura's not that new.
Yeah. I don't know. One of my favorite dinosaurs now, though, is Zool. And I'm not as young as that discovery by a long shot.
That's true. Well, maybe you can't get an exact age, but you can get an idea.
It's true.
And that wraps up this episode of I Know Dino. One last thank you to everyone who participated in our t-shirt design competition. And if you want to purchase your own shirts and see the 5 winners of the competition, then go to our store at bit.ly/iknowdinostore. Thanks again, and until next time.